"Your Highness Harold, it's time to prepare." The words echoed in Harold's ears, but his mind was elsewhere. He, Harold Weldehavels, the third prince of the mighty Dehavels kingdom, was a character straight out of a bizarre dream. With his slicked-back black hair and dull, grey, he was the epitome of a villainous sidekick. Harold, a character perpetually embroiled in dubious schemes, was, in his own words, the lowest of the low. But unlike most, Harold was aware of his true nature. He was a character in a chat-based romance smartphone RPG called Engage Hazard. In his past life, Harold was an ordinary college student named Haru Tachibana. Shy and introverted, he found solace and connection in Engage Hazard, pouring his part-time earnings into its alluring gacha roles and charming chat conversations. Then, one morning, he awoke to find himself reincarnated as Harold, a character destined for a truly grim end. Harold's role in Engage Hazard was far from glamorous. He was the pathetic lapdog to the rival character, constantly bullying the protagonist and ultimately facing a fate worse than his master's. He was a character so insignificant, he didn't even make it into the spin-off, Engage Hazard Girls' Side, which featured his handsome older brothers, the first and second princes. His most pressing problem? Death. Harold, despite being a mere side character, was fated to rebel, a rebellion that would inevitably fail. He would be executed before the protagonist's burgeoning harem, a humiliating and final end. With 3 years until the main storyline of Engage Hazard begins, Harold is determined to rewrite his destiny. His reputation is already in tatters thanks to 13 years of reckless behavior, giving him a negative starting score. The protagonist is his younger brother, the fourth prince, and his older brothers are the rival characters. There's no escaping involvement. Engage Hazard itself was a peculiar game. It revolved around the protagonist finding the world's greatest fiancée to ascend to the throne, offering a blend of adventure, romance, and witty chat exchanges. However, its financially demanding features led to its demise, with the game shutting down just 6 months after its release. This unexpected termination left Haru, now Harold, heartbroken, having invested so much. But now, Harold has a second chance. He refuses to die. He's committed to avoiding every event in Engage Hazard and creating a new path to survival. Today's meeting is crucial, and he cannot afford to fail. As Harold declared, "I absolutely can't afford to fail in today's meeting." He raised his fist to the mirror, a self-deprecating laugh escaping him. Will Harold manage to defy the predetermined narrative and carve out a new future for himself? "Is this really okay?" Harold muttered, staring at his reflection. The white formal suit, laden with gaudy accessories and pronounced shoulder pads, screamed poor taste. It was an outfit designed for a villain, not a prince trying to reform his image. "No, this outfit won't do. Get me something else." His loud refusal startled the servants, who quickly scrambled to find an alternative. Harold, now dressed in a subdued and clean outfit, felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this modest appearance would improve his first impression. As he prepared to leave, a flash of memory hit him. "Oh, I forgot my handkerchief." The maid promptly fetched one, and Harold found himself gazing at a familiar dragon-embroidered cloth. It was the same one he'd given to a crying boy in the palace, long ago. The boy's name escaped him, but the memory lingered. Time was short. Harold hurried to the reception room where his father, King Evil Weldehavels, awaited. The king, seemingly dignified and kind, held a secret. 3 years from now, he would declare that the next king would be the one who brought him the world's greatest fiancée. This declaration would kickstart the main storyline of Engage Hazard, plunging Harold into a series of unfortunate events. Harold, what's wrong?" the king asked, noticing Harold's sudden distraction. "Eh? Oh no, I'm just a little nervous," Harold stammered, pulling himself back to the present. Seated opposite the king were a middle-aged man and a strikingly beautiful girl. As they rose, the girl curtsied gracefully. Alexandra of Chevalier. Platinum blonde hair, sapphire eyes, and cherry-colored lips, she was the daughter of the Duke Chevalier, who controlled a third of the kingdom's territory. And in Engage Hazard, she was Harold's fiancée. In the game's storyline, immediately after King Evil's declaration, Harold would perform an unbelievably rude action and break off his engagement with Alexandra, all to pursue a better woman. This would infuriate Duke Chevalier, leading to a rebellion against the kingdom, with Alexandra and her brother at its head. The protagonist, of course, would resolve this crisis, gaining recognition and eventually romancing Alexandra as one of the main heroines. Harold's role in this was to be a mere pawn. In one particularly dark rout, both Duke Chevalier and Alexandra were executed for treason, all thanks to Harold's actions. He was, as he put it, the worst of the worst. Despite her minor role in Engage Hazard, Harold, in his previous life as Haru Tachibana, had been utterly infatuated with Alexandra. She had only one still image, no expression variations, and 3 ellipses for dialogue. Yet Haru had played the tutorial dozens of times just for her scene, emailing the developers daily for her as DLC and defending her honor on social media. Now, standing before the real Alexandra, Harold was overwhelmed by emotion and tension, unable to speak. His silence, however, was misinterpreted. "It seems Lord Harold doesn't fancy my daughter," Duke Chevalier remarked, his displeasure evident. "What? I apologize. Her beauty was just so overwhelming that I got nervous," Harold blurted out, the truth in his words. King Evil chuckled, but the Duke remained unimpressed. "Very well," the king declared. "It would be easier for both parties to speak without us around. Harold, guide Miss Alexandra through the palace." Here, in the palace, it's an exceptionally beautiful place, with various flowers blooming throughout the year. Harold guided Alexandra, his voice barely a tremor despite the internal turmoil. Harold, socially inept as he was, found himself struggling. "Ah, right. Since we're here, shall we have tea on the terrace?" he proposed, hoping to break the stifling silence. She simply followed, showing no interest. Discouraged, Harold's thoughts turned grim. Was he destined to die, and would Alexandra be executed because of their fated engagement in Engage Hazard? He shook the thought away. No, he couldn't give up. "Alexandra," he blurted out, surprising her. "Let's have tea on the terrace. Come on. You don't have to be so serious all the time. Let's enjoy the moment." His efforts to lighten the mood were met with continued silence. A servant approached, offering tea. Harold accepted, trying to maintain his composure, but Alexandra's icy gaze remained fixed on him. The silence became unbearable. This is nice tea, right, Alexandra?" No response. He tried again, awkwardly reiterating his earlier observation about the palace courtyard's beauty. Still nothing. Finally, in a burst of self-deprecation, Harold admitted, "Ugh, I know I'm not the best prince, causing trouble for everyone, being selfish, and all. So I understand if you don't like me." His voice trailed off. "What is your highness Harold trying to say?" She finally spoke, her eyes narrowing with a hint of anger. "Ah, well, you see. Give me 3 years. In that time, I'll become a man worthy of you. If, after 3 years, you still find me unworthy, I'll personally ask His Majesty to dissolve the engagement." Harold pleaded, even kneeling and bowing his head to her. It was a humiliating act for the infamous third prince, but if it meant saving both their lives, it was worth it. After a tense silence, Alexandra's response brought immense relief. "Understood. I'll look forward to His Highness Harold's appearance 3 years from now." "Tea, thank you," Harold exclaimed, leaping to his feet. Reminded of the palace staff around them, Harold quickly composed himself. "Alexandra, let's go back." "Yes," she replied. With newfound determination and Alexandra's hand still in his, they returned to the reception room, where King Evil and Duke Chevalier awaited. Soon after, Duke Chevalier and Alexandra departed. As Harold watched them go, he clenched his fists, the warmth of Alexandra's hand lingering in his. In 3 years, he vowed, he would become the man she deserved. "Alexandra, if you find meeting him unbearable, don't hesitate to speak up." Duke Chevalier repeated these words to his daughter, Alexandra, on the carriage ride back to their mansion. He made it clear, while they had fulfilled their duty to King Henry, an engagement could always be dissolved. The Duke's disapproval of Prince Harold was no secret. Harold was infamous throughout the De Havil's kingdom, mockingly known as the incompetent trash prince. It was understandable that a father, especially one as lenient as Duke Chevalier, would not want such a man as his daughter's fiancé. However, Alexandra held a secret desire. "Father, have you forgotten? The engagement with Prince Harold is something I desired. I truly want to accept it." Her words visibly surprised her father, who rarely showed such raw emotion. For Alexandra, this engagement was the culmination of a long-cherished wish. Since a childhood encounter, she had harbored deep feelings for Prince Harold, and now, finally, she could be with him. The Duke, despite his unease, conceded. "However, Prince Harold mustn't continue his previous behavior if he's to be your husband. I'll make sure to emphasize this to King Henry as well." Alexandra knew this meant the engagement would be annulled if Harold reverted to his old ways. But she doubted he would. Prince Harold had made a promise. 3 years. "Give me 3 years! In that time, I'll become a man worthy of you." His unprincely act of kneeling and pleading had revealed a straightforward personality that Alexandra admired. Yet, a mystery remained. Why had Prince Harold behaved so recklessly until now? Even the Duke of Chevalier's extensive intelligence network couldn't unearth the reason. 3 years prior, he had suddenly transformed into the rumored incompetent trash prince. Alexandra was desperate to understand why he had played a false version of himself, for she knew the real Prince Harold was the most wonderful person, kinder and more diligent than anyone else. She gently squeezed the dragon-embroidered handkerchief she had received from Harold that day, suppressing her excitement for the fulfillment of her long-cherished desire and her anticipation for Prince Harold's efforts to become the man she knew he could be. The morning after his fateful meeting with Alexandra, Harold lay in bed, his mind racing. He was in the world of Enhanza, a smartphone RPG where romantic comedies unfolded in chat boxes and the main story, filled with battles, progressed in an RPG format with card battles. Harold knew he had to get stronger. Once he was truly embroiled in the game's scenarios, he'd face a barrage of enemies, thieves, assassins, enemy nations, armies, even legendary magical beasts and heroes. As he was, he'd be utterly helpless and meet a swift death. In Enhanza, each character possessed unique skills and attributes. The protagonist, Wilfred, was the exception, with customizable attributes and skills. Weapon cards provided attack and defense boosts and granted special skills. However, Harold faced a unique challenge. "Well, male characters don't appear as cards in the game," he mused. Enhanza was a romance RPG, and male characters simply weren't a focus for players. Harold, in the game, was a sacrificial lamb, with inconsistent and confusing stats. The creators seemed to have neglected him. Despite this, he had some unique traits. His affinity was darkness, a stark contrast to the royal family's light attributes. He boasted exceptionally high magic attack and magic defense, but his physical defense was pitifully low, making him incredibly fragile. On the bright side, Harold had the highest SP, skill points, maxed out at 999. However, he couldn't actually use any skills due to his light affinity, yet his SP bar never depleted, making him a truly peculiar character. Harold's immediate goal was clear. He had to prepare as much as possible before the main story began in 3 years. His ultimate desire was to live peacefully with Alexandra, far from the succession war or any other game events. But if he had to fight, he'd be ready. Determined, Harold decided to begin his search for a suitable weapon. If this world truly followed Enhanza rules, there should be ultra-rare UR weapons, even more powerful than SSRs. In the game, these were gacha pulls. In reality, he'd have to find them manually. The worst-case scenario is that they treat UR-class weapons as national treasures or legendary items, he thought, acknowledging the high probability that such powerful artifacts would be under strict national control, making them impossible to acquire easily. He needed to gather information on every weapon and learn about the heroines. Most importantly, he needed to find an alternative to Harold's infamous Death Scythe. Despite its name, it was light-affiliated, not dark, limiting its effectiveness. He hoped the game's freedom to choose weapons would apply to him here. Now, let's get up and start searching. Harold felt a surge of confidence, despite the odds. 1 year from now, he'd be enrolling in the Royal Academy, the main setting of the game, and he needed to be ready. He intended to navigate through the coming events quietly, avoiding contact and disturbances as much as possible. Just as he was about to get out of bed, a knock echoed through his room. "Excuse me." A voice called, and the door clicked open. A maid entered, bowing politely. "As of today, I am in charge of taking care of Prince Harold's affairs. My name is Marion Sierra." Harold's eyes widened. This was no ordinary maid. Marion Sierra was unmistakably one of the main heroines from Enhanza. His plan to avoid protagonist and heroine interactions to steer clear of his bad ending was already failing. So you came to greet me because it's the first time, right? It's okay, right? Harold tried to sound approachable, but Marion's polite, almost detached. Yes. From now on, please take care of me. Followed by a graceful curtsy, left him feeling awkward. At 15, Marion was 2 years his senior, and despite his past life as a university student, Harold was currently a social outcast with no experience talking to girls. So, please take your time. If you have anything, just call me, Harold offered, trying his best to be friendly. Marion, however, looked at him with a puzzled expression. Harold wondered if his little scoundrel face made his smile seem creepy. Well then, excuse me. With a deep bow, Marion left the room. But as the door clicked shut, Harold distinctly heard her mutter, "How unlucky." He wasn't surprised. He knew she was disappointed from the moment she entered. Why wouldn't she be? He was the incompetent trash prince. Harold stared at his reflection, a pathetic figure on the verge of tears. The tragic past of Harold, before his memories of his previous life surfaced, was a part of the story Enhanza didn't explicitly show. Since childhood, he had been constantly compared to his talented older brothers, Cardis and Raphael, and eventually branded incompetent. Despite his desperate efforts to catch up and earn his parents' recognition, no one acknowledged his struggle. On his 10th birthday, his mother, Queen Margaret, had delivered a crushing blow. "You can't even be of help for Cardis, so at the very least don't hinder his progress by being on his way." Now, embodying Harold, the pain of those memories surged through him. Anger, sadness, suffering, loneliness, and frustration. He clenched his fists, struggling to suppress the overwhelming emotions that threatened to erupt. "Harold-sama, I've received a message from Cardis-sama's attendant. He wishes to dine with you today." 1 month had passed since Marion Seiler, a main heroine from Enhanza, became Harold's personal maid. Their relationship was strictly professional. Marion often sighed or muttered complaints, and Harold actively avoided contact to prevent triggering any unwanted Enhanza flags. Dismissing her was out of the question, as it would surely lead to more bad endings. The immediate problem was a dinner invitation from Cardis, Harold's older brother. In his previous life, Harold had always tried to curry favor with Cardis to gain their mother Margaret's recognition, a true brown-noser. Harold's memories suggested Cardis kept him around for potential usefulness, though the vibes he recalled were far from brotherly. The invitation itself was puzzling. Cardis, 2 years Harold's senior, should have been a first-year student at the Royal Academy, which mandated dorm stays even for royalty. His presence at the Imperial Palace gave Harold an uneasy feeling. Despite his misgivings, declining the invitation might cause more trouble. Harold had a sudden, brilliant idea. At dinner, he would try to push Marion onto Cardis. This would accomplish 2 things. It would distance him from a heroine, and it might help Marion achieve her dream of supporting her family by becoming Cardis's attendant. This takes care of one of my concerns. Being the disliked Harold had its conveniences, he mused, despite the pain of admitting it. With the dinner decided, Harold headed to the training grounds. Since his reincarnation, he'd been diligently training, determined to avoid death in any Enhanza event. But the real challenge was how to get stronger quickly and effectively. Unlike games, this world didn't have levels. To increase stats, one simply had to train. But how did one raise magical attack and magical defense when lacking magical skills? Harold, whose affinity was darkness but whose existing skills were only physical, found himself scratching his head. Physical training was straightforward, but magic was a mystery. He considered the possibility of using a weapon with magical skills. In Enhanza, some weapons came with unique abilities, and perhaps wielding one could help him train his magical attributes. It was unconfirmed, but worth a shot. In any case, what I should do is max out my physical attributes and become a bit more capable, he decided. Harold grabbed a wooden sword and began swinging relentlessly. 980. 990. 1,000. He collapsed, exhausted but satisfied. His somewhat unfit body was holding up. He poked his slightly protruding belly, determined to get rid of it. Above all, he had made a promise to Alexandra. In 3 years, he would become a man worthy of her. As he tried to get up, a familiar figure entered his field of vision. Alexandra! He exclaimed. She approached him, gracefully wiping away his sweat with a handkerchief. Harold-sama, well done. So, what happened to you? Harold stammered. His Majesty the King graciously permitted me to stay here in the capital until I entered the Royal Academy. Alexandra explained. Harold's heart sank slightly. She was here, close, and he realized she was likely assessing him, planning to report back to her father, Duke Chevalier, and potentially annul their engagement. He couldn't afford to show weakness. But then, Alexandra's next words caught him off guard. However, Lord Harold, you've been working hard to fulfill our promise from a month ago. Harold let out an embarrassed laugh. He was thrilled by the unexpected praise. I have no talent, and I've been lazy for so long. To stand beside you as your fiancée in 3 years, I must work harder than anyone else. Alexandra's expression softened briefly, a hint of sadness, before returning to her usual composure. And, if it's all right with you, could you allow me to assist you in your training? Harold blurted out, dumbfounded by her utterly surprising request. If you're okay with it, would you let me assist you with your training? Alexandra requested, her hand on her chest. Harold was dumbfounded. He pictured her as delicate and unsuited for strenuous activity. Despite my appearance, I have been practicing swordsmanship since childhood. Alexandra chuckled, a slight smile gracing her lips. Harold, still skeptical, couldn't reconcile this image with the gentle, conflict-averse heroine he knew from Enhanza. All right. Shall we have a little spar? She proposed when Harold's skepticism became evident. Harold hesitated. What if he accidentally hurt her? Duke Chevalier, her father, would surely come after him. Yet he agreed. The sight of Alexandra, in a dress and wielding a wooden sword, was jarring. But then, thwack! Harold found himself sprawled on the ground, easily defeated. Ouch! Why, you're really strong, he admitted. Alexandra explained. The Chevalier family holds about 1/3 of the kingdom's territory, and to protect it from external threats, strength is highly valued among its members. Her explanation made sense, but her strength was still astounding, surpassing even the main heroines in Enhanza. Having sparred with you, Harold, I can see that you possess talent. You will become a man worthy of the kingdom in due time, Alexandra stated confidently. Harold was baffled. In Enhanza, his character was physically weak. Why, you're joking? He stammered. No, I'm not. Alexandra continued. However, gaining such strength is no easy feat. Moreover, you mentioned earlier that you would become a suitable partner for me in 3 years. Harold confirmed his promise. In that case, please allow me to assist you until you achieve that strength. Harold was taken aback. This wasn't just for today, she was offering indefinite assistance. That might be a bit too much. I apologize for the trouble. No need for apologies, Alexandra replied firmly. Besides, Harold, becoming an outstanding individual is not only for me but also for your sake. Her words relieved Harold. He initially thought she was looking for reasons to annul their engagement, but it seemed she was now focused on forging him into a suitable partner. This aligned perfectly with his goal of avoiding a bad ending. Is it really okay for me to rely on you like this? He asked. Yes, she affirmed. Harold, unsure about improving his magical abilities, realized her guidance would be invaluable. Thank you. To be honest, I've been training recklessly without a clear idea of how to get stronger, he exclaimed, beaming. Having his favorite heroine as a training partner, and an incredibly strong one at that, was more than he could have hoped for. Sorry to keep you waiting. Harold burst into the dining hall, only to be met by the calm, cool gaze of Cardus Well-de-Havels, his older brother and the first prince of the de Havels kingdom. You're late, Cardus stated simply. In the world of Enhanza, Cardus was already deeply involved in national affairs and widely trusted by King Evil, making him the prime candidate for the throne. Yet his cold, detached nature often led people to favor the second prince, Raphael, who was known for his friendly demeanor. Cardus's character would only soften through his struggles for the throne and rivalries with the main character. He wielded the royal family's powerful light attribute skill, de Havel's emblem, a skill Harold, with his darkness affinity, could not use. Cardus's view of Harold was clear. A useless younger brother. This assessment was ingrained in Harold's memories and confirmed by the game's scenarios. Harold sympathized with his past self, who had desperately tried to curry favor with Cardus and their mother, Margaret, just for a shred of acknowledgement. But now, as both Harold and Haru Tachibana, he knew better. He wouldn't follow scenarios leading to bad endings, and he understood that neither Margaret nor Cardus would ever genuinely favor him. From now on, he would graduate from being a lackey, keep his distance, and quietly live his life. "Dear Ni-sama, what made you suddenly want to have dinner with me?" Harold asked, deliberately injecting irony into his tone to gauge Cardus's intentions. A dinner with a useless younger brother was unprecedented in Harold's memories. Cardus explained. "Well, I heard that Harold got engaged to the daughter of the Duke of Chevalier. So, I thought of arranging a celebration." Harold understood. Cardus believed this engagement would secure the Chevalier family's support, significantly boosting his own chances for the throne. It was a misplaced hope, as Duke Chevalier opposed the engagement. Harold's initial plan to push Marion onto Cardus was now moot. He simply intended to be polite, and then excuse himself. However, a steward approached Cardus, whispering something that clearly displeased him. "Let him in," Cardus instructed. The steward bowed and headed for the door. "Hey, Harold. Congratulations on your engagement," a cheerful voice announced. Entering the dining hall with a bright smile was a young man with golden hair and gray eyes, Raphael Weldehovels, the second prince.